Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Today I'm visiting Dr. William J. Cole. He happens to be my physician at NYU Medical Center, Langone. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good seeing you. You look very healthy.
Thank you. I think I am. I haven't been anyplace. So I know what my life has been quite restricted because everybody's keeping me home, finally able to go into the elevator and outside. But how has your life changed?
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously, working at the hospital has been an absolute, nightmare for the last 4 or 5 months, and it's been pretty stressful. Trying to juggle isolation at home and coming into work and worrying about my safety of my family that I'm going home to, and also trying to keep a practice active and trying to take care of people that you're not able to see. It's been rough.
Yeah. How many patients, when did patients start coming to the hospital? Your office is in the hospital, we should say that. How many patients started,
Well, it's interesting.
when did they start coming in?
I think there's been a big change in the last few weeks. For the last few months, we've been doing telemedicine, where we've been basically talking to people through their phones, and it's been better than nothing. I think it's opened up a whole new way of taking care of people, and it's allowed a lot of stuff to go on safely where people don't leave their houses. And I do personally think it's going to be the future in a lot of care where people travel long distances. But in the last 2 weeks, the offices have opened up and it's been like an explosion. I think it's been all of the patients who've been waiting in the wings and waiting for it to be safe to come out. And I'm in the office every day now, and I'm seeing, almost as many patients as I was seeing before this all started.
Well, really, I thought people would be afraid to come to the hospital. I am. I don't.
Well, you know what? It's a very interesting question, and this is what everybody's dealing with. On the one hand, we're telling people it's not safe to come out. You should stay home. You should be isolated. And the other hand, we're opening up a business. We're opening up an office, and we're inviting them to come and giving them the option. So it's complicated. It's also, it's schizophrenic because we're sort of in our heads and the patients are trying to figure out doing two opposite things at the same time. I think it's what everybody is dealing with in the rest of their lives, whether you go to shopping, whether you go out and meet your friends out in a public park. The hospital is just part of that whole decision making.
And it's also part of what you decide you want to do. It's balancing your feelings about safety and your feelings about your emotional needs, right? I mean, if you...
Well, I think we spend our lives doing risk stratification. Everything we do, as you get older especially, there's some increased risk to doing it. This time is extreme, right? And from a medical point of view, my job is to keep you safe, right? My job is to make sure you don't get sick. So I'm going to try to the extreme max to do whatever needs to be done to keep you healthy. And that means keeping you home, keeping you away from family members, keeping you away from people that are going to get you sick. But that's balancing out you figuring out your life and what you want to do. It's a personal choice. I think things are going to open up and we're dealing with this all over the place. But as you see, Fauci, what does he say? He's worried about it. He's worried. The medical people are worried. And they're not going to tell you it's safe to go out there. All right. We're going to tell you, no, the government, the businesses, the economy, jobs, that is forcing people to start going out because that is important. And also being locked up for 3 or 4 months is driving people crazy. So we have to make a decision, and the patients are the ultimate deciders.
It's true. I think it's a very difficult thing for some people. But, when you were telemedicine or whatever you're going to call it from home at the beginning, was your staff also at home?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Everybody was at their own, apartments, houses, and they were having phone calls forwarded to them. Uh-huh. So it was as if we had an office,
right?
You could 5 or 6 people, but they were all at their own places.
Right.
And the computer had the ability that we would be chatting with the Epic program. We can continue to have like background conversations going on all the time.
Now, the future of telecommunicating. I mean, I've read that Cleveland Clinic is one of the leading proponents of it.
A place like Cleveland is definitely going to be a major player in this area, because what they do is they basically market to the country and the world. They're not just taking care of Brooklyn or Queens or local place. They want to have a group of patients that come to them because they are a high level of specialty, and people can't fly every single time they need to get their blood pressure checked. Right. So this is going to be, in their business model, it's going to be a real boom. And I think the learning curve for this thing went sky high because of need, but it's definitely going to play a big role.
In the financing also of institutions. I mean, you work for a large institution. Are you seeing cuts in your staff? I mean, is there a problem with money now?
Well, on the surface, there's been no real changes, okay? Obviously, the hospitals needed people. We've been, packed to the gills with sick people. And a lot of the outpatient stuff has been closed, and people have been home and been working part-time. I don't know what the near future is going to be. The hospitals aren't talking about it. There's no, background gossip worrying that people are going to start laying people off, because I think, like every other business, things are hoping to be ramping back up. The hospital's been doing elective surgery. And I, in fact, went for a hernia operation myself 2 weeks ago. I felt it was safe enough to come in. I think it's safer than going to the supermarket, although there is some risk, right? There's some risk.
But there's always a risk going to a hospital, right?
Right. It's a little
I don't like to say that, but
no, you definitely should say that. There's always a risk of coming to the hospital.
Now, if you were a practitioner private in a smaller town or even in the city, aren't they suffering more financially?
Well, that's an issue. Yeah, right. Because obviously, if you work as a salaried physician in a place, you're getting your salary. The question, a lot of these contracts for salary jobs in major hospitals are dependent on productivity. You have to have a certain number of RUVs, which are basically a measurement of the amount of work you're doing. Whether at the end of the year, the hospital is going to come back to everybody and say, listen, because of our, slowdown, all your salaries are going to have to be cut. We don't know.
Yeah.
That may be done. I think what's happening is a lot of these major institutions are hoping that there's governmental bailouts and money that they'll get that will help to sort of curtail some of the losses related to this. Whether that's going to be enough, we'll see.
Right now, they don't have it yet, do they? I mean, that's one of the problems in Washington. You've been practicing how long?
34 years. I've been here at NYU 42 years.
No, that's including school and your residency and everything.
Right.
But
yep, everything. Yep.
You've seen enormous changes. Did they become
mostly for the good? Mostly for the good.
Good. So when we talk about telemedicine, I remember when a doctor had to send by mail x-rays and things like that, right?
Well, one thing's very interesting in terms of how medicine has changed. In the good old days, you didn't rely on CAT scan. You didn't rely on these testing because it wasn't available. So all you had was your physical exam and your history taking. So your contact, touching the patient, examining them, was all there was. So it was extremely important that you were able to do that. And today, if that was the case and all we had was this, it would be terrible.
Yeah.
Now, the physical exam is much less taught. There's much less a skill. It's much less relied on. And so people are usually sending people to CAT scans and MRIs and blah, blah, blah. It's probably better medicine. You're diagnosing things more accurately. So that's still up and running. So you can see a patient through telemed and refer them for a CAT scan or an MRI and do what they need done without laying their hands on them. I'm not saying that's an advance, because I think there's a lot of, we can talk about that. But I think in terms of how the system works and how care is done, I think this sort of fits perfectly into what's been happening anyway.
And all these advances, though, have also increased the cost of medicine.
Oh, my God. Yeah, forget about it. You know,
We can
I think
have
the problem is, in the good old days, you relied on your skills and you were happy and you were comfortable with it. But today, people aren't as comfortable without having further documentation because of somebody coming in and pointing a finger at them. So the easiest path of resistance is the test.
right. The telemedicine is very helpful for rural areas and things, but it doesn't mean that the patient's going to be home and the doctor's going to be remote. There'll be maybe a place for the patient to go with a nurse practitioner or something like that.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, having some sort of a hybrid. You know,
Yeah.
what's done now is, you know, I just saw a patient from Catskill just this morning, and he needed an EKG. He said, well, I'll go to my local doctor here and get an EKG and get a fax to you. So you can do things locally without having to drive 3 hours both ways.
Do you tell people to be tested?
I personally am telling everybody I see to get tested. I think it's just a good social policy, just to know where things are going. But I'll tell you from experience, if someone has not been sick, and if they are not living with someone or had contact with somebody who was known to have it, it's rare that I'm finding antibodies.
Yeah.
You know, I'm also taking care of older patients, so those are the ones more likely to get sick.
Yeah.
And to not be asymptomatic. You know, you may be 18 years old and hanging out with your friends, and you may have gotten exposed and have antibodies and never got sick. So that may be a different population. But most of, you know, adult patients, in my experience, is that if they get not sick, nobody in the family, they're negative. Although on the other hand, if somebody was sick, everybody's positive.
Do we know if you can get sick again?
Well, that's a question we're all asking. I mean, emotionally and probably just hopefully, I'm assuming that being exposed and having antibodies will be protective, but no one is telling people that yet because we don't know. And we don't know how long. You know, it may be good for a few months. It may be good forever. Maybe this virus is going to mutate and it's going to be like the flu. And then every year there's going to be the chance of getting another variation. I don't know. The question about, you know, it's interesting. We talk about the doctors who come back after getting sick and they come back to work. They're often put more into the front line because they're felt to be protected, which is interesting. We have decided that it's likely to be protected.
Right.
We can't tell people that.
Do you take your temperature every time you come to the hospital?
Well, it's interesting. When you walk in the door now, I mean, just talking about the hospital, just to kind of, this is another big issue, is trying to make people feel comfortable about coming to the hospital if they need to. Everybody at NYU working here has been COVID tested in terms of finding out if they do it when people are coming back to work. Every day when you come in, you're supposed to have your temperature taken and answer questions about whether you've been sick. So everyone who's working here is being monitored chronically, okay? Patients who come in for surgery or any procedure that's going to involve some invasion, like having a colonoscopy or you're having a pulmonary function test, they're all being COVID tested 2 days beforehand, just to decrease the exposure to people working here also, and decrease the exposure of them coming to the hospital where other patients are going to be. I think they really have changed dramatically trying to make this place as safe as possible.
Do you anticipate another wave of the virus here?
Absolutely. There's no reason why there shouldn't be. I don't have any doubt there's going to be another wave.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
I think the next wave is not going to be like it was in October, November. All right, it's not going to be like that, because I think everybody is being protective, and not everybody, but a lot of people are being protective. So if they have a flare, there's going to be hot spots. There's going to be hot spots, but there's definitely going to be a bump up.
We're already beginning to see the results of Memorial Day weekend, aren't we? In spots.
You're right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right. A few states have bumped up. I know that. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's also in New York. It's interesting too. The amount of patients who've had it, which I think they have really minimized, because the number of patients I have who've been sick, who are not part of the numbers, is huge. I think that fact, is going to be somewhat protective in terms of the amount of people out there who are now could be actively infected. It's not herd immunity yet, but there's some component of that. So I think New York, when it starts having the bump up, you're also, although you're balancing that with the fact that people are going to be commuting, so you're going to have people in crowded, even though they're trying best, the buses and the trains are going to be a place where it's going to be.
Yeah, and flying in and out of from different places, right? Transportation, air.
The bottom line is we as a community, we as a government, we as a society are saying that we understand there will be a risk, that people will get sick and people will die, but we are going to start opening up the world and economy because we have to, all right? And within that world, each individual is going to have to make a personal decision about what they are willing to put themselves through in terms of exposure. And and just knowing that there's a risk.
One of the things that's really scary now are the revelations of the impact of the virus on the patients who've been sick, right?
Yes, I would say that the group that has the biggest chronic impact are the older patients. I've had many patients in their 80s and 90s who have gotten sick and thank God survived, but they're frequently left much more diminished, whether it's neurologically diminished, energy diminished, their abilities, the disabilities are worse. And it's sort of common sense. You're 85, 90 years old and you have a very severe illness. The ability to pop back from that is not easy. In terms of younger people, I've had a lot of patients who had sort of chronic complaints, but they tend to get better over time. I haven't had a lot of experience where a few months have gone by and people are still complaining about things.
Is that because you're a cardiologist and not a doctor of another specialty? Do you think?
The problem is most of my patients also, I see them and they've had COVID on top of their heart issues. So I'm seeing a lot of COVID patients. So that's not just because I'm a cardiologist and I'm isolated.
Right. That's true.
The other issue is cardiology has had a huge amount of experience with patients having a lot of cardiac problems. There's been heart attacks, cardiomyopathies. This is a clotting disease. This is a disease of small vessel disease where there's been a lot of cardiac involvement. There's been a lot of every organ in your body involved. Kidney failure, heart failure, neurologic problems, strokes, pulmonary emboli. We've learned a lot from this, I'll tell you that.
You're also an internist. I mean, some of us go to you as our internist, not.
Well, yeah, you train as an intern before you train as a cardiologist. And then once I have my teeth in somebody's ankle, I sort of hold on, and I end up taking care of the rest of them too.
You're fearless, right? So you think it's going to be a permanent change in our lives?
Well, I think medically, technology, this is going to be part of our lives. It's going to be integrated in with the rest of things. We're going to use this and use it in a good way. All right. I think we are going to be in this protective masks, gloves. I'm in my office with my door closed. When I go outside and my staff, I'm wearing the full thing. Every patient I see, I knew everything. We're going to be doing this for a long time. And I don't know when it's going to end. Whether there's going to be a vaccine in 6 months, whether the incidence of the problem is going to be so low that we're going to feel secure by pulling stuff down. I don't know when the date's going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be a while.
Will it be as effective as the Salk vaccine? I lived through the infantile paralysis, polio epidemics, and we got over that very quickly with the Salk vaccine.
It's sort of interesting. The question you're asking is how effective are vaccines?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I assume there's a difference in the individual vaccine in terms of the disease process and the chance of getting it and the type of virus and the type of vaccine. And there's not a blanket statement that, it's 95% protective or it's 85% protective. I don't think anything is 100% protective. Obviously, polio has become pretty much almost non-existent. So that's been a very effective vaccine. The viruses are different. That's one of the problems.
What is a virus? Just define a virus.
a virus is a group of proteins that work as a unit to build a structure that often will invade our cells and utilize some of the protein producing ability of our cells to reproduce their own viruses. And when they're in there, they basically can destroy the cells. It has a different structure than bacteria, or a different structure than our regular mammalian cells in terms of the nucleus and the different materials inside of it that are used to build things.
And different viruses attack different cells?
Yes, and different viruses have different abilities too. For instance, just as an aside, a virus like herpes zoster, which is shingles, all right, chickenpox, which is similar to herpes simplex, it's in the same family. That virus has the ability to take its DNA and to integrate it into our DNA, so it becomes part of us. And then our cells can then become a factory for this virus if the immunity of the system allows the virus to start to reemerge. That's why people who have chickenpox when they're a kid can have shingles, because that DNA is part of them and it comes out. And that's why we have the shingles vaccine now, which is trying to turn the immune system to suppress our own ability to protect ourselves from a virus already in us. The flu is different. The flu is a virus that doesn't become part of you, and it doesn't become, doesn't reemerge. Every time it infects you, your body gets a response to it and then destroys it, and then it's gone, and you have an immunity to it. The problem with the flu is that the virus changes enough each time that your immunity isn't sufficient the second time around. And that's why every year you need another vaccine.
And SARS?
That's a good question. I don't think they really know. They don't really know. I'll say one thing though. Again, it may be a short-term fact and it may not be long-term. If I thought that people could be reinfected, meaning you got sick, you were very sick, you got better, you got antibodies, we're not seeing people coming back with second episodes 3-4 months later. It's just not, it's not part, there hasn't been reports of it. So at least short term, there's evidence that these antibodies are likely to be protected. Whether this is going to pan out 6 months from now, a year from now, whether the virus is going to somehow mutate and change so that even though you had it now, it may affect you later on. These are things maybe a virologist knows more about the details of this virus can answer that question. But that's what we're discussing.
Do you have meetings with other doctors to exchange all the different experiences and your own thoughts about what's going on?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's very interesting in terms of what happened with this whole explosion. And I always think about it, it's like life in wartime. When there's a war, there's a tremendous amount of medical advancements. There's a lot of things that we learn during war because there's no board that you have to get an approval of to decide to do something. You don't go through the bureaucracy. You don't go through years of planning. You just do it because you have no choice. So that's what was happening in the hospitals over the last 3 months. There was just, the rule book went out the window, in terms of trying things. And that's why you get all of this cockamamie, all the different drugs that people are taunting, saying that should work because everybody's trying everything, okay? But I'll say that the world's community, medical community, the information that flew around the world telling everybody what to expect, coming out of Italy, coming out of Seattle, coming out of these places, we all knew before it came what to expect. We were warned. And obviously, it traveled very, very quickly. And the expertise went dramatically up. We went from not knowing anything about this to feeling we knew a lot about it very quickly. And I think in some ways it tells us, could there be some way that we should try to look at medical advancements in the future and learn that perhaps there's something to be said about doing things more quickly? Obviously, you have to be careful, and that's part of the problem. That people get too careful, and the education and the changes take too long. But I was really amazed at how quickly the information spread.
So it's a globalization of medicine, basically, right?
Right. And obviously the web the internet allowed it to happen. You know, it allowed it to happen. We you know, and everybody was out there publishing, and not waiting for like a peer review, 6-month review of the article.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the other thing. You know what I'm saying? Most stuff takes a long time to get published.
And some of the articles that came out have also been retracted in the journals, but that's...
Well, you know, that's the price you pay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the price you pay. I think you have to realize that is the downside of having information coming out too quick.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, overwhelming enthusiasm, you know, during a war, it's hard to not have those emotional states, you know, and you don't want to be told at a later point, oh my God, you knew this and you didn't tell us, you know, so you're sort of stuck between, you know, a lot of different pressures. And I think overall people did pretty well.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you feel that way. We've come to the end of this visit, I'm sorry to say. But
thank you for having me. This is fun.
Dr. Cole has been our doctor for quite a few years, and I appreciate very much his visit. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Ronnie. Thank you.